he can ask, I can ask him questions, and he can talk to me. And our subject is about sanctification, or another way is spiritual growth. And of course, we are very much interested in the fact that we are saved by His grace, by God giving us Christ, and then being saved. Has it actually changed our lives? Has it actually affected us? And of course, when we have the new life, and that Jesus is in our heart, we start to walk in the faith, and we're baptized into the body, and we're being fed. I just received a letter today from someone who, blessed me by writing. I mean, they've never written me a letter before, but it was so encouraging, and they were so appreciative, and they said that they are being fed. They watch it online, um, you know, because they're not from here. They're not from this. They're from another state, and that was nice to hear that they feel that the Holy Spirit is speaking to them in their house, was they are more elderly now, and that was nice to hear. So we are being sanctified by God's grace in this lifetime, which is pretty miraculous in a way, that we are actually being affected or spiritually growing. So I could ask Pastor Kimo, would you like to define that a little bit, the way you did a few minutes ago?
If we think about our growth, well, okay, I'll take an example from 2 Corinthians 3:18. It says, like, as we look at God's glory, we are changed. Now, some people take that as, I just look at how amazing God is, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, I'm changed. But another way to look at it is like, what do I do in terms of looking at His glory? Like, maybe it means that I study how Christ acted in certain situations. Then I may think about the principles behind it, and I internalize that, and then my life is changed. So one question that sometimes people answer differently is sanctification automatic? Like, if I just, or like I just need to be a passive recipient and do nothing? Or are there things I can do to enhance my spiritual growth? And I think spiritual growth is actually something where I need to cooperate with God. It's not going to be automatic. There are things that I can do, I should do. And then there are things that, I very much need God to do His work. And like, about defining spiritual growth, there's an author, I don't remember his name, someone recommended his book to me, and he, the author said that it's not possible to be spiritually mature if you are emotionally immature. And I think we can't reduce spiritual maturity to emotional maturity. So in that sense, it may not be quite accurate, but I think he does make a good point that we shouldn't consider spirituality to be something that we can exclude our emotional maturity or our maturity in our social relationships or financial maturity or whatever. I think God is interested in all of our lives, not just, the aspects that we would consider spiritual. And that's why I kind of want to raise the thought that we need to grow in understanding. Well, we need to grow as human beings in every area of our lives. Not everything is equally relevant at any time, but if we exclude something, then that actually becomes the area where we probably are going to be weak in, and we are like not growing.
That's very good. Um, what comes to my mind when you said that is like you have a believer, let's say, in the church worshiping and they're listening and they're worshipers, and then they walk out of the church and they find, there's somebody in the parking lot that they are jealous of, and they carry this jealousy in their heart. And the point is that a church service is one thing, but like Jesus actually changing my life and leading me in maturity, that's really where we're living. That's what we're talking about, right? Um, there are people that just kind of compartmentalize their spiritual life. They just have the church life and then in their private life. I think I actually, to be honest, like I think I also want, like, in my home and in my everyday life, my finances, how I think of people deep in my heart, loving people in my heart, or people that I might not agree with, but like God is with me, and I want to walk before God, this way, and that the key is that the Holy Spirit would be doing this, and that we are giving room for the Holy Spirit to do this, or however we would say that, right? So sanctification is a very real thing that we can actually change and mature. And Pastor Kimo, do you believe that a believer can really get to a place where they could actually somehow make an evaluation, or it occurs to them after 5 years or 2 years or 10 years that they actually say, I really, I have changed?
Absolutely, and I think that should be something happening in our lives. Um, Sometimes I'm concerned, um, like as a pastor, I look at people's lives, and sometimes I see someone who has been in the church and followed God for many, many decades, and I see that in some ways they are really immature. And then I wonder, like, am I doing the best as a pastor? I'm not the head pastor, but as one of the pastors. Or are we as a church doing our best to help these people grow? That's a concern of mine. And I understand we can't take the responsibility for someone else's growth on ourselves, but we can take the responsibility of helping them along the way. And then, I wonder, like, and I don't have an answer to, like, what I could do something better. But, like, you have someone who has been in the church for 40 years, and their social skills are very small. You wonder, like, how can I help them? Or maybe they make very quick decisions without thinking about the consequences, or they just can't handle their money or their schedule, or they can't keep their commitments, or things like that. How can we help these people?
Yeah. Maybe I could ask you to comment on some verses here, because in every church, let's just take an arbitrary number of 100 people. Out of 100 people that go to a church, by the way, the church isn't a group of perfect people. They are people that need a hospital, or one analogy would be like a hospital, or even on a respirator. You know, they're really in trouble. They need a doctor. They need restoration. They need rehab. So out of 100 people, let's say you have 15 like very good people. Yeah, let's say they are spiritual. They are growing. They're like great believers. Like Stephen in Acts 7, it says, or chapter 6, that they recognized Stephen as a really exceptional believer. He was like a very much loved. Like, so there will be those people in a church, we hope, okay? Then you have others, and then you have probably 15 people at the other end that always have problems, or even more, could be 30. That'd be a high number maybe, but they constantly, I mean, problems that are obvious, problems that are not hidden. Then you have a lot of problems that are more hidden, you know. Like, doesn't it say in Timothy that some men's sins come before them and some come after? Maybe you could comment on that one. But before you do that one, I want you to comment on this one. This is 1 Thessalonians 5:14. It says, "Now we exhort you, brethren, warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, be patient toward all men." And then it gives more in the list. But I just look at that and just say, wow, these are like categories. There are unruly, there are feeble-minded, and then there are the weak. So, you know, this is a good point he made. As a pastor, how can I help the unruly? How can I help the feeble-minded? How can I help the weak? Because I'd like to see their growth. On the other, there's another side to it, and that is that they just simply are weak. I might not see them change. They might be feeble-minded, and I might not see that. So out of 100 people, there might be 15 people that every day have a problem with their money, their relationships, their, just living. So might be. So, Pastor, you want to say something?
Yeah, I haven't studied this verse for a while, but just thinking about it, like there are different weaknesses. People have different problems, and I don't have an answer to my question, like how could I better support these people? But one way that I think we can do it, and we are doing it to some degree, is actually to be a real person in their lives with open communication. We can talk. I mean, it's up to them if they don't want to talk about something, but sometimes I think there can be a temptation, and especially in a church this big, like you know a lot of faces, but how many people do you really know? But I think a lot of change and a lot of growth takes place with those relationships where you really know the person, they really know you, there's trust, and then there's maybe the openness, like I've really messed up my finances. What could I do? And then you can share something that you have found useful, or you can say like someone who is like this socially very immature, like you could say like, well, did you see how they actually got offended by what you said, and like help them see these connections, and then little by little they could grow. But I think it just helps so much when you have these close relationships where you actually dare to be open. It's not about like there necessarily being a system. I mean, systems can help get organized and so on, but really like this. When the Bible speaks about the church as brothers and sisters, that and not every brother or sister is a very close one, but if you have close brothers or sisters, how many of those relationships you have, not with those with whom you have been already 40 years, who are already very mature and so on, but maybe a new person, and really like being a close friend. I don't know if like I have any like better answer than this, other than the other part is teaching. Like you teach, you use the pulpit, and you use maybe a special workshops, whatever. Like there is this help for whatever those in addictions or those in who have lost a loved one and so on, different situations in life.
That's good, yeah. Like grief share, you've lost a loved one, a small community of interacting people, um, drug addiction and other addictions, and you have like an Alcoholics Anonymous, and where they are somehow admitting or open about their problem and they are communicating. Have you ever heard about this, there was an emphasis years ago about having your problems and talking, and there was marriage therapies, and but both parties talking and explaining their position, and they have found, like statistically, that it wasn't as good and as effective as they had anticipated. They thought the problem essentially was a communication problem. So they worked on the communication, but it still didn't solve the problem. Anybody here can relate to that? You had a relationship problem. You both talked it out, but you both went away angry. But you got to express yourself.
It can still be a communication problem if you just express yourself, but you cannot hear the other person in a sympathetic way. But communication is not always the root, but I think it's an important part of it. And maybe the root is somewhere else, but it's manifested in communication. You can kind of like address that part. But I just read a book recently on marriage therapy, and one of the claims there is that the way you argue is not as good a predictor of whether the marriage stays together as the fact how safe both parties feel the marriage to be. Like safety is, according to the author, a very good predictor of how it turns out. And safety, basically, I think they gave 3 parts of it. Like one is like the security that that the person is for you; they're not going to hurt you intentionally. Then another one is availability. Like if you really need them, are they going to do what they can to be there? And of course, it's not always humanly possible. That's understandable. But is there enough of that availability? And then the third one was like emotionally sensitive responsiveness. Like when they are there, can they connect with your emotions and your needs?
Yeah, that's good. Wow. Where were you when I needed you? No, that's good. That's so true, isn't it? Like, do you really love me? We could argue, but do you really love me? And I've witnessed that with couples where they're very, like for another couple, they'd be horrified how this couple treats each other, but in fact, they love each other. But they have very good time, like yelling or arguing, or you would say if you're outside, like you would just say that's like not normal or not right. But actually, they love each other. They're very secure in each other's love, but they talk like that because that's how they communicate, and that they enjoy it. That they're not hurting each other, but you're like, like in another setting, this would be like devastating, but not to them. So that's funny. Yeah, because the essential elements that you mentioned are there in the relationship. Okay, so sanctification. We could finish up here. We're talking about how what I hear and what I learn actually affects my life, and I like to think I'm somehow excited about it. That my life is going somewhere. That there's meaning in life. I'm kind of excited in my heart that Jesus is with us in life, and it means something. And we're moving in the plan of God, and we're growing in Him and learning of Him. We actually are are changing. So do you want to say any closing words?
Yeah, we spoke quite a bit about like people who have really easily identifiable problems, but I want to encourage those who don't have them at the moment that there's still a lot you can do for your growth. And one thing is like think deeply about your values and then learn to watch your life on the basis of your values. Like what is really important for you? Do you live consistently with that? And as a final comment, I read um, this article in a newspaper some months ago, and I haven't studied it at all, but it just inspired me quite a bit. Like they interviewed a historian who had written a book about history, and that he had divided societies into like or like created this idea of a trust society, which is a society where, based on his definition, like if you meet a random person, you think that you can probably trust them, and that is a rare, like not extremely rare maybe, but a relatively rare society. Like most societies are not trust societies. But the historian said that Finland is one of the trust societies, and the reason for that, according to him, is that in the 17th century, somewhere around there was this Lutheran Reformation in Finland, and he said that the key thing was that was not that people go to church to hear a sermon, but that they would read their Bible and reflect on their lives. And then, as a result of that, they learned this important ingredient of what's the name of it? Like self-reflection. Like they look at their lives and compare it to a standard they have. And that's a necessary element for there to be a trust society, that enough people do this. And now Finland is relatively secular today, but we are still reaping the benefit of a Bible revival centuries ago. And to me, that's kind of interesting. Like, if you want to grow, then learn to reflect on your values and how you live them up. And like this kind of healthy introspection is an important element of growth. Not introspection in terms of like how in some circles it's like, are you saved or anything like that. I'm just talking about your values, development them, read the Bible. There are a lot of values in the Bible. And think about it, internalize, and also find your true values. Like every one of us has values, even if we're not aware of them. Maybe that's a long concluding comment, but I just didn't want to all be about problems.
No. Okay. Let's repeat it. What Pastor Kimo said. I feel in our country we have the same thing. I mean, for us, I feel like we've had these great awakenings and spiritual life. Christian spirit, the Holy Spirit in the lives that established a morality. Like this is a big part of life. A civil society is based on morality, but behind the morality is spirituality. That's how I like to think about it. Like behind it is the Spirit teaching me truth. And lies are unacceptable. I can't accept a lie because we have the Spirit of truth. So God cannot lie, and nor can we. We have to be honest and truthful in our hearts. So when we read the Bible, we have this desire in our heart. Even like, have you ever noticed, like, you could read about David, and deep in your heart, you just say, I would like to be like David. Or you read about Peter, James, and John, and you just read about them, and you go, oh, wow, they were with Jesus, and wow, that's, So we have like a built-in kind of mindset of who to identify with and who we would like to be like. We don't like to think about, I want to be like Judas. We think more of like the higher and the more noble and the truthful. And when we read the Bible, we have this in the background in our heart. So right now, America is a secular society. Like we're moving very much away from this self-reflection of having a standard. I think there is self-reflection, but a lot of confusion. Who am I, and what's important to me? And actually, there are so many things that people are going after that are of a lower nature than God and the Bible. So the lower one is a hedonism. I want to be happy. You know, if your goal is to, I taught that to the high school this morning. I said, if your goal is to be happy and you have a scale of 1 to 10, that someday you will say, I'm a 7. I'm pretty happy, but I would like to be a 10. And then if sometime you're a 10, you're going to say, I'm afraid that someday it's going to be a 2. And it's always like that. So you'll never be really happy, because happiness isn't our design. Our design is to glorify God. And when we know God, find God, we will be satisfied. Even if we're not happy, you know, we will be satisfied. And even if there's suffering, we'll have a purpose because we glorify God, you know. This was a short lesson, but to go back to what Pastor Kimo was saying, I do think the secular world is rolling along having borrowed the moral values that's in our Christian society. But they are sometimes also like, I think we're further away from God than you are in Finland. I don't know. It's hard to compare, but like we are really radically doing bad things and justifying it in the name of secularism or the name of, you know, the modern world without absolutes. So G.K. Chesterton said an interesting statement. He said, there wasn't anything better than paganism until Christianity came, and Christianity was better. And ever since, nothing has been better than the Christianity. There isn't anything better. And so we're going to go to the other, we're going to be suffering. And there'll be suffering because people are confused and empty and tired. And when our society loses trust, like our founding fathers said, that the United States of America is based on religion and its morality. And when we lose that, it'd be very hard to get it back. And I think like we never really had it, except when God gave it to us. And if God has given it to us, he could give it to us again. And that would be awesome. Okay, did you want to say something? Okay, you're dismissed.